Hui, welcome to the Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting this afternoon. It's still morning, 11:30 a.m. Welcome to those who are joining us via live stream, and also welcome to Councillor Brown and Councillor Kiriopa who are joining us online as well. Can you hear? Nice to see you there. Just a reminder to councillors and everybody that's present that please have your phones turned off, and we'll have a break to allow time for you to take your messages if they're urgent. So I'd like to lead off the meeting by asking Councillor Lee to start us off with a prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As is my custom, a variation of Parliament's opening prayer. Almighty God, we give thanks for the blessings which have been bestowed on us. Laying aside all personal interests, we pray for guidance in our deliberations, that we may conduct the affairs of this committee with wisdom, justice, mercy and humility for the welfare and peace of Rotorua. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor. It appears that we have no apologies this morning, and I'll now call for declarations of interest, if there are any. There appear to be none. Next, we'll go on to item 4, which is urgent items not on the agenda. And councillors, this item is to accommodate the Standing Order 9.12, where items of business on the, need to be put on the agenda because they cannot be delayed. And I would like to advise that I have one such item that has been brought forward by the CE. This matter is relating to the variation approval for Tarawera Sewage Scheme Stage 1. And the reason it's not on the agenda is because it was brought to the attention after the agenda was published publicly. This matter cannot wait until another meeting or the next meeting due to timing and due to contractual matters. This will, I would advise that I would like to put this item into the public excluded session and to enable industrial negotiations without disadvantage or prejudice, but we'll deal with that later in the meeting. At this stage, I would just like to ask that we have a mover and a seconder to accept this report on variation approval Tarawera Sewage Scheme Stage 1 be received at this meeting in the public excluded session. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Wang. I would put that motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. I'll now ask whether there's any minor matters for discussion today. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Yes, I have two issues that I'll be very brief with to keep us under time. First one was I've been approached by two very distraught members of the Linmore community regarding an incident which happened on the 21st of June. A car travelling at extreme speed misjudged the sharp corner at the top of Isles Road and crashed into their house, narrowly missing their sleeping son. This is apparently not the first time this has happened to that particular house. They have obviously been traumatised by this event. The photos they sent me were quite scary, confronting, so my thoughts go out to them. Their questions were, they raised concerns regarding the lack of signage telling people to slow down, basically, because of that corner is very hard to see. If you don't know the road, it is very difficult to know that it's there, and apparently it's alleged that the two people involved in the driving the vehicle were under the influence of drugs. So that just exacerbated the problem if that turns out to be true. So they've approached council asking that we address the issues that they've received, that they raised. They have received correspondence from staff outlining what they're going to do about it, which is great. However, the one concern that they have, and I quote from it, is they feel underwhelmed by the sense of urgency. Obviously, like I mentioned before, they feel very traumatised by this, and that nothing is going to happen until a road safety governance meeting on the 31st of July. That seems an awful long time for some signage to be adjusted. So I'm just raising that as a concern that they have, and they are very worried about it. So my thoughts go out to them. Hopefully we can speed up the process if possible. The next issue is also a traffic safety one. This relates to an issue that was raised to me at the Tato Pōnamu Hui last Thursday. The new intersection, well, it's not a new intersection, it's just an existing intersection that has not been enhanced on the corner of Vaughan and Orwhata Road that leads into the Orwhata Road extension where the new subdivision has been opened. Their concerns lie with the increase in traffic going down that into the Orwhata Road extension, and that there's been no, I guess you could say, adjustments made for that intersection to be taking that into account. Apparently there's been an accident where a vehicle hit the Macoya Community Centre, and another one with a food service delivery vehicle smashed into a road sign. And this is all within a short space of time, according to the hui that I was at. So again, they wrote a letter to Council raising these issues, and I was also pointed out at the meeting that by one of the committee members, I noted yesterday that the Kotu-Bennett-Pauanui Road intersection has got a new island and give-way sign. It's a similar intersection to Orwhata and Vaughan Road intersection, and questioned why a similar approach had not been taken out there. So I'll just leave those with you as action points. Don't need to be addressed now, but perhaps they could be dealt with at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for raising those matters, and obviously there's some severe concerns and consternation in the community about that, so I thank you for raising them. They are operational matters which I might just ask the CE to make some comments on at this stage anyway, but I take on board your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, as I've said before, you're very welcome to raise these with me. This is the first time hearing of these matters, and obviously as soon as I do hear about them, the sooner I can act on them. So very welcome to raise those directly with me, and members of the public are welcome to write to me also, as they are welcome to submit service requests.
Thank you. And we'll move on to, there's a minor item from Councillor O'Brien as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Madam Chair, could I just ask for some advice, please, if we could look at perhaps through the environmental side of this committee. Could I just ask or seek clarification in the future? The resource consents around the Rotorua wall. I've been to a couple of public meetings where that's been brought up to Regional Council, who of course whose responsibility it ultimately is. But given that there is a resource consent and there has been documented in public concerns over certain holes or the fragility of some parts of the wall, I just wonder if perhaps maybe this council at some stage should look at, and again I'm thinking more about for the future, the next council, during the next triennium, whether perhaps there's something there that this council should perhaps look at where the regional council is up to. For me, it might pay for us to perhaps have an objective set of eyes. Of course, obviously, regional council is of course aware of the issue and has spoken about, suggested solutions. I just wonder if at some point, though, this council, maybe through this committee, should perhaps also be casting its eye on the time frame and making sure that the solutions are dealt with expediently as quick as possible, hopefully. I don't expect anything today. As I say, I've raised it as a minor matter, but I would just hope that perhaps at a future meeting, maybe with the CE and her worship might have some ideas about how council could perhaps, whether it's inviting regional council here to talk about the issues and the options, but I think it's perhaps something we should look at.
Actually, thank you, Councillor O'Brien, for raising that issue, which has been out there in the public and there's a lot of interest in it, and you're right. It would be helpful, I think, perhaps to understand more about the progress of this issue, and your suggestion around asking the Regional Council to come and speak to this meeting or a council meeting, depending on the structure of the next council, would be a great idea. So perhaps we'll just put that on the list of action points to go forward for another council, because I don't know whether we'll have time in the next month or so leading up until the election to do that piece of work, if that suits.
I'd be more than happy with that, Madam Chair. And also, could I perhaps just ask if we could also perhaps just have an understanding of the resource consent conditions around the wall? I think that would be helpful for the next council, just to have a fully formed view.
Thank you. Yes, I take that on board as an action point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further minor matters, councillors? There appear to be none. So we'll move on to item number 5.1 on your agenda, councillors. That's the minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting held on the 4th of June. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of this meeting were a true and correct record, please? Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Wang. Are there any matters for correction or comment? There appear to be none. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item number 6, which is notices of motion. And today we do have a notice of motion received from Councillor Patterson. It has been distributed separately to you, and you have a copy of this notice of motion in your stela. And you also will have some material that has been provided by the team to help to understand the issue that is alluded to in this notice of motion, and also some background. So I will now hand over to Councillor Patterson to overview his notice of motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This was brought to my attention trolling through Facebook as I do, and I saw some very alarming comments from members of the Ohinemutu community about a notice that had been posted down there following a pollution spill. What piqued my interest was that I found out through further investigation that this wasn't the first time, and that why I wanted to bring this to our attention now is we are heading towards a major decision next year regarding what we're going to be doing with the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. As was alluded to earlier, and we saw in previous reports, 4-point-something million, nearly 5 million was invested in the idea of a treatment bed so that the effluent from the wastewater treatment plant would then be discharged into the lake. Now, that has not been taken off the table completely, as was discussed at this meeting, that it is still an option for future consideration, because my understanding is that the quality of what comes out of the wastewater treatment plant will be significantly higher than what it was previously. Now, this issue here goes to the credibility and perception of this council about the way we view our lake. Some of the other comments I've had from people is, you know, I'd really like to be able to swim in my lake again. I'd really like to be able to eat the coda and the trout from our lake again without worrying about any potential ill effects that may be caused from whatever. Now, having sewage spill into the lake is not an ideal situation. I've read the report or the memo that was supplied, and I understand it's a complex issue. It's a much bigger issue than just Ohinemutu. My concern is that we need to sometimes take little bites out of the elephant. It's a very big elephant that we have to swallow. Ohinemutu could be one of those bites and probably put as a priority. It is one of the first settlements of Rotorua. It is a taonga for this community, has been identified as is whakarewarewa. So we need to give it a little bit more weight in looking after it. And Ruapeka Bay, we are working with our colleagues at Bay of Plenty Regional Council to improve the flow of our stormwater from the Utahina and out into the lake. Now, these kind of issues can have the finger pointed at us, saying, well, if you want us to do this, and yet you're not prepared to look after your part of the agreement, which is anything that goes into the lake from our stormwater system, our wastewater network, that's our responsibility. So I hope that we could go to the negotiating table with a clear conscience and say we are doing our bit to look after this lake. We would like you to do your bit as well. So from the perspective of doing something about it, the 3 points that I raised there was asking about the major causes of the current sewage contamination, which were clearly spelled out, thank you, in the memo. Outline the options to prevent that from happening again. It's obviously, as I mentioned before, a much bigger elephant to eat than just Ohinemutu. But given, as I pointed out in my last point, the environmental and cultural harm these contaminations cause, this should be something of a priority for us. So all I'm asking my colleagues is that we consider that, that we look into some sort of remedial action that can be done to prevent this as best we can from ever occurring again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we proceed, I'd just like to see whether there is a seconder for this motion, which is in front of you here, councillors, on the screen and also in your agendas. Do we have a seconder? Councillor O'Brien is the seconder. So I'll just read it out for you, what's on the screen here, that the Rotorua District Council resolves to direct the Chief Executive to produce a report, A, which identifies the major cause or causes of the current sewage contamination of Ruapeka Bay in Ohinimutu and its link to the 58 approximately previous instances between April 2006 and now. B, that outlines options to prevent such occurrences from happening again in future, including estimated costs, possible external funding sources and consultation steps with relevant mana whenua and the Regional Council. And C, that given the environmental and cultural harm these contaminations cause, it is presented to councillors for consideration before the end of August 2025. Now, I will open up for some questions both to Councillor Patterson about, but he's already explained well why he wants to bring this to us. And also, I might ask Stavros to answer any questions you may have around the report that was circulated to all the councillors. That report will be is tabled and will be put with the minutes that go out alongside this this notice of motion. So, councillors, do you have any questions? Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you. Maybe first, just to Councillor Patterson, there has been quite extensive information that's already been provided by the memo. Do you still believe that progressing with your notice of motion is required now that we have a full understanding of what's actually occurred and the accurate information behind it?
Would you like to reply to that, Councillor Patterson?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. Really, Mr. Michael's report was wide-spanning, so it covered the whole range of problems in the network. What I'm trying to get down to is there actually anything that can be done feasibly to stop this from happening to Ohinimutu itself? The rest of the network is as I mentioned, a very big elephant to eat, and we can't physically do that. We're doing it in increments as we move through the renewals process. I get that, but is there any way that we could move Ohinimutu to the top of that list?
Thank you, Councillor. I might just go to Stavros for some comment on that.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I recognise and appreciate what Councillor Patterson's intent, is here too. I think as I've tried to explain into my memo in response to this notice of motion, obviously our actions in terms of managing our wastewater network in total is guided by policy settings elected members are setting. And those policy settings obviously define what's unacceptable performance indicators. Now, there are both policy matters to be considered by elected members, but also practical matters to be considered by elected members and financial matters to be considered by elected members. Policy matters, the way we are tasked to steward our networks, are guided by a range of regulations, and obviously those regulations recognize that the discharge of untreated wastewater anywhere in our living environment is unacceptable, and obviously, it recognizes there are limits to how much a network can be totally, safe-proofed. Now, as a matter of policy setting, if elected members want to make some unique and specific decision about a particular segment of the network, i.e. Ohinimutu or any other part, it's a policy matter that you have to decide, and you have to decide why a section of the network is more important than another section of the network. The health officers and the regulatory guidelines indicates that wastewater should be contained in a closed system, It recognizes there are achievable targets and some targets are not financially achievable. Now, if you do want to explore and consider a specific segment of the network to be treated differently than other networks, that's a policy decision you have to make. From our perspective, I outlined from a technical perspective, the network has got some limitations. The outflows that occur in the network meet our KPIs, and obviously, consistently meeting so for the last 8 years at least, and we are meeting those KPIs. Now, there are the issue of the causal factors behind that, which relates to the age and condition of pipelines, but also relates to a number of uncontrolled, events. For example, the impacts of ground conditions, geothermal activity, the practices of individual households, the fact that out of 550 kilometers of pipelines in the public network that we have, there is an equal number of another 500 kilometers of private pipelines that feed into the network. And many of these overflows are caused by matters and materials and the condition of those private pipelines. So I did outline that in the best of circumstances, if all our public pipelines, even if they were renewed at a much accelerated phase, would possibly only address 50% of the causes. The other 50% of the causes are outside our control. And obviously, there is a balance of benefit cost analysis that need to be made before you actually reach the stage where in the whole network or in a segment of the network, zero events, it's your target, policy setting. And that's decisions you have to make. My memorandum outlines some key facts, in this particular area. And if you want to consider policy setting at a different level, our job is to tell you what the consequences of that policy setting and our ability to give effect to such a policy setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros, and I'll ask the CE to make some comments too.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, councillors. I'm aware that we've spent quite a lot of time around this table talking about sewage schemes, and particularly around the cost estimates around sewage schemes. So I just want to be very clear around what I'm being asked for here. There's two aspects for it. One is around setting a target, a performance target that is significantly better than what we've got, which is 1 in 1,000 connections, which we do meet and have met for the last number of years, and possibly a higher level of service around a particular part of the network, which I understand. Typically, that's quite an extensive piece of work, which we would do through either an annual plan or annual plan amendment process, or through a long-term plan. So those are typically the vehicles by which you would address this. So I just want to manage your expectations that if you are asking me to do this, you'll get some heavily qualified costs, because we will not have the time between now and the end of August to undertake this work to a level of certainty that I'd be comfortable putting a price in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CE. Are there any further questions? Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te chairman, o te rā tātou katoa. Thank you, Stavros. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Patterson, too, for the kōrero. Just wanted to ask, in the memo, it mentions, Ohenemitu, because it's low-lying. Does the system in Ohenemitu, does it only deal with Ohenemitu waste, or is it all coming this way and being pumped elsewhere?
Councillor Waru, the memo gives you the catchment area. There's in the picture there of the catchment area, which is predominantly the Ohenemitu.
Is that in the red?
Yes, that's the area. That's the catchment of the pump station.
No further questions there, Councillor? I'll move on to Mayor Tapsell and then...
Yeah, I just have a further question, but I certainly have a comment later if you're open to comments from councillors. Stavros, my question is, with the intention of the notice of motion wanting to prioritise Ohinemutu and to prevent future events, I am just very mindful, as you've mentioned, that half of the pipelines are actually in private land. I'm also very cautious to, at very short notice and without adequate consultation, given that the agenda will go out 1 week before, so potentially only 3 weeks. Would there be a risk that this would also then have a cost on private households if it's identified that the leaks have actually come majority or from private households?
Your Worship, and as I note in my memorandum, the causal factors for such events have a number of contributors, and one of the contributors is those private laterals. So if we do want to eliminate something, we're going to address all causal factors. And obviously, the only way to do that is actually to regulate and impose a regime of, let's say, some form of warrant of fitness for private pipelines. The average household has got a private pipe that leads to the public main. And if you want to minimize or eliminate the influence of those private pipelines, then you need to make a policy statement which says, well, every household will have an obligation to meet a warrant of fitness for those private pipelines. That may involve every few years evidence of a CCTV testing, may involve the gully traps or every individual house to be elevated to a certain level. They may involve that the condition of the private pipes to be maintained at a specific level. Historically, I would say that to undertake such a work on each individual household probably involve the imposition of up to $5,000 of renewal pipes every few years in the private network. So we have not done an analysis of that, but you cannot eliminate a problem by only addressing half of your network. If you want to minimize or eliminate the problem, you need to address the network that is in private hands and private responsibility through some kind of regulatory tool.
Thank you. Councillor Waru?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I should ask earlier. Because I don't think I picked it up in the memo. The actual, I suppose, event, my understanding from looking at it, did not happen on a private line. Is that correct?
Correct. A mains pipeline broke. We don't know for sure what the action, but judging by the evidence, we've seen, it's a clean break, which appears to be some kind of ground movement that cracked the pipe. But in considering the total events that take place every year, the contribution to these total events comes equally from a private, network and the public network.
So, yeah, this one is only pertaining to the recent. So, okay. Because, well, I'm an Ohinemutu boy, and I remember when that first came out, I was still at the media or something like that, in those days, in 94 or 5, something like that. And there was a big korero about having that in there. But it had been, Ohinemutu was the first settlement in Rotorua, and there had been stuff put in there, even by our own people, had put in pipes and everything, so, and the roads, everything were done, because it was a reserve at that time. So I'm quite aware that's really aged, and there's probably some less than adequate plumbing going on there, tied over from those days. But it would be really good to, if it's movement, well, that place has always had movement, and it always will. And I'm seeing you've got some options there around using particular materials now that are available to us. They weren't available then. So I think that's a good thing to do, and explore that and see how we can make this, or improve it. So, kia ora, tēnā koe.
Kia ora, Councillor Waru, and I have a question from Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Yes, question. Stavros, did I hear you say in your kōrero to us, thank you for all the information you gave, but if we wanted to recognise Ohinamatu with a special location, its special first settlement, and all the wonderful things that Councillor Patterson highlighted. Are you saying we can do it, or all the 550 other kilometres that are around that you mentioned, we've got to wait in line, which will never happen?
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Well, I think my comment was that this is a policy setting. You are elected members. Only you can decide that, whether you want to give an area some kind of specific, special status, in terms of, instead of being managed in a way that, over and above the agreed KPIs, for the network. That's a decision, you as elected members can contemplate, and make the decision. Our directions and our instruction is that we're managing the network in totality, under certain KPIs. We have regulatory measures imposed by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry, Offices of Health that requires us to contain, wastewater and notify the public where we have events such as like that for health precautionary purposes. If you want to treat Ohinamatu as a special area, that's not a decision I can give advice to. It's your decision.
I might just add through you, Madam Chair, that there are many ways to recognise the special significance of Ohinamatu. Sewage infrastructure is one, but it might be very timely to also consider the stormwater implications of the stormwater flow paths, particularly managed by the Regional Council, that I would advise potentially have much more significant impacts on Ohinamatu.
Thank you, CE. Question from Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, obviously, as a seconder, I'm supportive of the intent of this motion. I wasn't counting on being the seconder because I understood Councillor Kiriopa, but we're obviously having some communication issues. So I'm happy to associate myself in her absence with this. I suppose to follow on from her worship's question, maybe if Councillor Patterson's happy, maybe A is no longer required given the memo we have received from Mr. Michael, but Mr. Patterson, Councillor Patterson can make that determination. I still think it's important that we get a sense of what the options are. And I wonder if perhaps if the CE would be more comfortable, and again assuming Councillor Patterson would be agreeable, perhaps if the August timeline was, say, perhaps one extended out to perhaps November or December of this year, would the CE, is the CE more comfortable that he could provide a detailed, obviously in line for the next year's AP?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm, from a practical point of view, I see people scrambling through standing orders, but that would be the logical time where these level of service changes might be considered. We have just adopted an annual plan, so that train's gone. So, as Mr. Michael said, the policy settings are typically changed on that cycle.
So if I could perhaps, maybe if Councillor Patterson might consider what her worship said about point A, given the memo we have received, and if he would be amenable to extending the August timeframe, maybe we could still.
Thank you for the suggestion. And I just would remind councillors under the standing orders that once a notice of motion has been put, it can't be amended. So we, as a process, we just need to deal with the motion in front of us first, but that doesn't preclude us from asking for some action points to take away from today. So I'll just move on to some further questions, but yeah, I think we might have to just deal with what we have here in front of us and then make a plan.
Just trying to be constructive, Madam
Chair. I know, as always. Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe, te chairman, tēnā koe anō. Might be more aimed at our CE. This question seems to me that the policy seems to be, it's coming forward as a better way, maybe potentially of seeing some change in some action rather than some reports. So my question is, what would if one wanted to review and or create perhaps a special policy, if we want to call it. Oh, it's a special place. Why not? What would the process be, and how long would that take?
Councillor, without advice from my team, I'm going to try and answer this. I think there are three things we need to do to I think, get to the outcome. I think from what I'm hearing from this debate, Councillor Patterson wants to get to. The first thing is to understand what we're trying to achieve, and if it is zero spills, then so be it. So understand what that is, and then put into place an asset response to that, and then provide a cost for that for this council to consider. Ultimately, the fourth step is understand who pays for it. So with those steps all happen at an annual plan and a long-term plan process. And what I'm hearing from this council is that you'd like to consider this matter specifically at the next annual plan process. So understand what the thresholds are. Currently, we operate the network with the same KPIs everywhere. If there is some appetite to have differentiated KPIs, that's something council can consider. You need to then consult with the community on how that's paid for differently, and then work out whether those response to that is an increase in infrastructure investment. That again comes back to council, and then a decision finally on how that's paid for. So that would be the steps, and all those things happen on a yearly basis at the annual plan. More significant, if the change is significant, then it would typically fall to a long-term plan, and that's where those opportunities are to make those changes.
Thank you, CE, for explaining.
Supplementary question, please, Madam Chair. So, to affect any kind of policy change, it would can only do it within the framework of an annual plan or a long-term plan. Is that what you're saying?
Well, councillors, you only allocate funds once a year to a specific program of work. At this point, we don't have a specific program of work that says that Ohinemutu is treated differently in terms of the sewage network from the rest of the network. We've got the same level of service throughout the network, and correct me if I'm wrong. So if we were to change that and allocate additional funding to it, you need to do that through the annual plan process, or we can bring you a paper on allocating some unbudgeted expense, but that typically hasn't been received well around this table. And given the discussions this morning around expenditure, I'm cautious about bringing those to this council.
Thank you, Andrew. Through you, Madam Chair. I only ask because, I obviously, Ohinemutu, the catchment area there is part of a renewal plan somewhere along the line. Is there scope to bring that forward to make a difference straight away? I'm just trying to look for options here.
The public network in Ohinemutu was renewed, completely renewed in 2009, as you see in my memo. The pipelines in Ohinemutu, because of geothermal activity, are derated. That means we reduce the life expectancy of it from the average 75 years to half of that to recognize the geothermal activity. So 2009 to 2025 is about 16 years. So we're halfway through its derated life expectancy. Now, again, I've seen no evidence in this particular incident here within Ohinemutu, the recent one on the 19th of June. It seems to have occurred because a ground movement. I cannot see any other reason behind it. Now, you cannot put HDP or PVC pipes in there because they will melt because of temperature. So we've got pipes that can withstand the temperature, but we cannot design a system that will be totally immune to ground movement and especially geothermal temperature variations that change continuously in that area. So we can consider all these options, but I'm trying to raise your attention to that the intention is good. The practicalities behind that, I don't want to convey any false message that at the practical level we're going to achieve a zero incidents, and that's what I want to raise with you.
And I'll just add that that's why I say this isn't a question of bringing forward renewals. We're already the renewals are not the problem in Ohinemutu. They're well advanced of where they need to be. It's a matter of whether you want an elevated
solution. Right. Okay. No, thank you. I'm just trying to explore because although I totally the intent, because Ohinemutu is, I don't know if that's going to get any immediate action or immediate results that I'd like to see anyway. So, kia ora.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions on that. I'll move to Councillor Wang and then Councillor Kiriopa online.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Stavros, for the memo and the detail in it. My first question is just around, I guess, the containment. So can you just talk a little bit about the process around containment after an event?
Well, yes, thank you, Councillor. One, obviously, our key performance indicators identify response times. The moment an incident has been identified, how much response times we have, and our KPIs requires us to respond within 90 minutes, of the event. And where we have a fugitive, wastewater, then what we call adduction trucks or sample trucks come in and suck it away to prevent any overflows into sensitive areas. Now, again, depends on the time of notification. The core issue is for us to understand where it happened, noting that we've got over 600 kilometers of pipes, into the ground around the place, and sometimes it's not easy to know exactly where and when such things happen. But from the moment we have identified that, we've got specific time frames to respond, and our KPIs identify that we meet all these response times. And again, the question is, once you have an event of this nature, we have a responsibility to not advise the public that an event has taken place, and so that people can take precautions until the event has been rectified. So our KPIs, in terms of numbers of events and in terms of response times, we already reported to you back in April that we're meeting all these KPIs. So these are very transparent events that and they are getting audited by the regulatory authorities every year.
Thank you, and thanks for providing the log of this specific incident in the report as well, noting the specific times and the response times from the team. The second question is just around the actual number. So you have in the report about that there have been not 58 alleged events, but actually 38 call-outs to Ohinemutu since the start of 2006, but actually 28 of those were the actual overflows. And can you speak a little bit about the reason, what was the background to those? What was it, the ground movement? Was it the third-party interference? Was it private use, malpractice?
I think sort of my understanding subsequent to writing this memo, my understanding is that the 58 events over the last 20 or so years covers the whole of the Utuhina catchment, not just of Ohinemutu. The Ohinemutu related call-outs were 38, 20 of those were actual overflows, and again of those 28, as I said, 10 of them occurred because 3 routes broke into lateral pipes and dislodged them. And we also had 6 of them that related to complaints about the public toilets, in that particular, on that site. I can't recall each one of the 22 events, but in the last 3 years, for example, we had 3 incidents, and this is the 4th one, which again clearly is a ground movement that has occurred. But the last 3 incidents in the last 3 years, one of them was caused by a third party because a celebration was taking place down there and someone put a peg of a marquee and punctured, the rising main. The second one was again, it was some kind of utility, work was taking place, a third party, and the third event was actually a natural sort of deterioration or because of ground conditions. And again, all these things were responded in time within our KPIs. Yes, our desire, like everyone else, is actually not to have any of these events. The question is that what's the practicalities behind that?
Thank you, Stavros. Just following on from that previous discussion around, I guess, the annual plan and LTP timing, I guess, for this topic, would it also be more suitable for, I guess, the 30-year infrastructure strategy to have this as part of that discussion?
Yes, that's right. That's where you would identify any changes in investment profile, particularly ones that weren't driven by renewals, but an increased level of service. So that's where we pick those up and provide the financial modelling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll move to Councillor Kiriopa online and then Councillor Kaifong. Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Oh, great. I was just, I understand, I can't really hear that well, but am I right, Stavros, in hearing that you said the last time the pipes were renewed in Ohinumutu was 2009?
That's my records indicate. That's what the records indicate, Councillor Kiriopa.
And how, the renewals, are they scheduled over a certain amount of time, or are they just as needed? Like when I guess my real question I'm getting to is, rather than renew the existing pipework, is there a possibility that we could look at moving the network that's within the village, that's we consider to be the problem, the wastewater reticulator, I don't know what it's called, but moving it outside the village, is that something that could be staged and looked towards instead of renewing the pipes in the future? Is that an option?
Well, sorry, my apologies, I interfered. You wanted to ask something else, sorry.
Was there something further, Councillor Kiriopa, and were you referring to the whole system or just particularly to the pumping station part of that?
The pumping station part of it. I mean, going up Lake Road rather than going through the middle of a significant geothermal site.
I'll be hesitant to engage, to involve, to get it too technical at the moment, but Ohinumutu is a low-lying area. The pump station is there because it collects via gravity from each individual house the wastewater generated, and to pump it from a low level to higher level mains. Now, if the pump station was to be relocated to higher ground, let's say Lake Road, then each individual house needs to have an ability to pump their own wastewater generated for each individual house to the pump station at high ground. So that means we need to change. And again, please don't take it for granted, but I would imagine that a system of, let's say, low pressure grinder pumps could be put each individual house so that those pipes can be pumped into somewhere else. So the network is designed at a low level to capture the gravity flow of wastewater and pump it where it needs to go. So that was the rationale for the network management in that area.
So if I can just add to that, I think that, and I'm starting to hear questions around distinguishing between a pump station serving only Ohinumutu as opposed to other parts of the current network.
That's what it does.
And reviewing that is a sewage scheme, which is what my earlier comment was around. And so I don't want to say let's not use any of the technical terms associated with any part of the sewage scheme. We're all, I think, pretty sick of that. But it'd be quite. That's the reason I suggest that if we want to reconfigure that network to do anything better, to give you a better level of service, that is a project, and my advice would be dealt with through an annual plan process or a long-term plan process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll take one last question from Councillor Kaifong. Thank you, Chair. The question is just really probably just going to Councillor O'Brien's suggestion about amendment to the resolution as it stands up there. So if A went, but B also says the occurrences from happening again, and I think Stavros has indicated that's pretty much an impossibility. So that makes that difficult. Just the question too, just around alteration of C to November rather than August. So the question is just around timing. Elections are in October. A new council will only be sworn in probably late October, early November, so even November would be problematic. And the question just follows on from Councillor Wang. So if it's, I think the investment, Stavros mentioned something like 27 million per year is currently the additional expenditure required to bring the renewals to good condition in 10 years?
Why is that? It's just an estimate.
Yeah, so that's and so given that significant level of investment, I would ask if that's really more a long-term plan decision rather than an annual plan decision. So timing-wise, it's problematic to be asking a new incoming council who may need to look at all of the network, all of the infrastructure together rather than just taking piecemeal bits of it.
Councillor, through you, Madam Chair, and that's why I said either an annual plan depending on the scope or a long-term plan amendment if it's of that scale. Yeah,
okay, so I'm just indicating that I can't support this motion as it currently stands, and even with potential amendments as suggested by Councillor O'Brien. Thank you, Councillor Kaifong, and Greg has alluded to the fact, well, he's given me advice that we can't actually amend this notice of motion anyway. So on that, I think we will just move to some discussion. If anyone's got any comments they'd like to make. I know the Mayor's got a comment. Did you want to start anything further as the mover?
Certainly. Thank you for that. Yes, basically this is what I wanted. I wanted to talk about this and for it not to be put in a grey basket in the corner and left for somebody else to deal with. I thought that it was this council as leaders to do something. Our community has said, we're not happy with this. I've seen the vitriol about it, and I totally toe-talk with their position. We should not be putting things into our lake. Our long-term goal is to be able to swim in Lake Rotorua again, to have it as what it was when I was a child. And that's a 20-year project. I get that. This is not a short-term solution. However, I believe we need to start, and it needs to be sooner than later. If we're ever going to fix this and alleviate the conditions that the people of Ohinemutu face constantly, and it's not just from sewage, it's from stormwater issues. Ruapeka Bay is sedimented out. The Utahina mouth is sedimented. There are lots of things that Ohinemutu is struggling with, and we need to deal with it. And adding sewage to the mix is not great. So if we think about the negotiating position that we had and that we were faced with what happened out at Rotorua, they did not want Paru going into their Taonga Lake. Now, the people of Ohinemutu have actually had that. So from a position going forward, if we can show that we are doing something about it, and we are serious about doing something about it, addressing these concerns, then that helps our negotiating credibility going forward when it comes to what we're going to do with the wastewater treatment plant effluent. We need to be operating from the position of showing leadership, taking the opportunities that are presented to us and fixing them. I shouldn't say opportunities, challenges that are presented to us and dealing with them. So whether this particular motion flies today or not, I just hope that my colleagues take it on board and that we need to do something about it. People won't put up with this for much longer.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, for your thoughts and for creating this space to have this conversation. Thank you. And I'll move to Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you. Look, thank you, Councillor Patterson, for raising this issue. I know that it was circulating on social media and it has been a good opportunity to talk about it. It was also very good to receive a detailed memo from staff, which I'm very grateful for. That must have been prepared quite urgently and quite speedily as well. But I do want to mention within the memo, this issue was fixed within the same day. So it was responded to within the timeframes of 90 minutes, and by the end of the day, it was fixed. I do also want to acknowledge that while I appreciate the intention to protect Ohene Motu, I can't support the decision-making to push this through without understanding the full consequences on other communities, and also considering the detailed information that we already know. So we have just adopted the annual plan. Within that, there's a wastewater network renewal of $6,262,000. So we do invest significantly. But if we were to support this motion and moving forward with preventing all such occurrences, first of all, half of them we just simply can't control because they're natural events, such as flooding. If we were to control it, then we're back to the discussion about stormwater detention dams, of which Springfield Golf Course was the most viable, if not the only viable option to put in stormwater mitigations to protect Ohene Motu. And actually, it also shows staff have fortunately been able to provide the estimated costs to address pipelines' age and conditions, and there actually is 67% of pipelines in our network are considered poor or very poor by age criteria. So while we are investing significantly, if we were to fulfil this notice of motion, instead of it being $6 million, the possible renewal could be $27 million per year, which will have, as noted in the memo, a high impact on targeted rate per year dedicated to this program. So that's just where I say, while I appreciate the intention, I think it should be for the next term of council through careful decision-making of the not only cost and benefits, but also having the conversation with our communities, because we often hear from our communities they don't like things being done to them. Without having had the opportunity myself to speak with residents of Ohene Motu, I'm just really concerned that they could be receiving a letter or seen in the paper that we intend to, even though it only happened in 2009, rip up all of the sewage pipes, which will cause significant disruption, and potentially also require them to upgrade some of their private pipes ahead of them reaching the end of their expected life expectancy, which, although is significantly less because of geothermal, still has quite some time to go. So I hope I've explained enough why I won't be supporting it, but I do appreciate the intention and certainly am supportive of continuing to look at how Ohene Motu can be protected, both environmentally and culturally, but just unfortunately not through this notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Is there any further comments, councillors? Councillor Maxwell and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things I've got here. First of all, I touched on it briefly, but I do want to thank Councillor Patterson for the passionate way he expressed a special place in our community. We've done this in the past, but sometimes it's so much nicer when my own colleagues can do it. Perhaps they've experienced some good things than that down there. But I do. Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. And all I ask is that, if there's any opportunities, we had an opportunity some years back when we had our lakefront development area, the $40 million project there, and at the time, some of us urged that a portion of it go towards Ohene Motu. Sadly, it didn't find favour with the current people. I wish you were there at the time, Councillor Patterson. It might have helped get it over the line. And the other thing, there's I want to touch on some significant things that have happened there that warrants its special place. Well, for me, even though I grew up in another part of Te Arawa, that is home for me now. But Ngāti Rangiruwa here on the other part of the lake, and that we deal with our own issues and that out there. And there in Ohinamatu there is a committee, Ohinamatu Residents Committee, that meet often, and they are working. I think they've met with you, also CEO, I think on your first day here, I think you met Auntie, and she helped you with something. But back in 2019, we had Prince Harry and Meghan visit us for the day. Another wonderful event that happened. And the New Zealand Herald wrote about the 7 days they had on their tour throughout New Zealand. That was the highlight of their visit. So it is special. And the other one I want to say, this is for tomorrow. Our committee meeting that's going to happen there tomorrow, Te Aroa 2050 Vision Committee, Standing Committee, it is special. It's going to the Paramount Marae of ours, and looking forward to that. And the last time we had something of significance with council and that there was back in 1980 when I think the 100 years was celebrated, and the township agreement was we reenacted the signing. So it is significant, but trying not to push one's own barrow, because we are here to look after the whole community. But there are times if we can look outside the square, it's like, surely I think internationally, if the Vatican Square, something was happening underneath there, I'm sure they would get special consideration to have something done. But Lord Ada, thank you for listening to me. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor, and thank you for your feedback. I'll move on to Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you. As the seconder, Madam Chair, I am happy if anyone else wants to. I'm happy to go last if no one else wants to. If Councillor Kiriapa wants to say something.
Councillor Kiriapa, no. Is there anybody else who wants to make any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to address 3 points, if I may. I thank Councillor Kaifong and her worship the Mayor for their very still constructive and nuanced points of view. First, if I can deal with the motion as such, I still would ask my colleagues to support this. I appreciate the CE's point of view. I still believe that it would be possible to produce a report, even if it was just very basic outlines of the options around, before the end of August. Frankly, any more detail than that wouldn't be required anyway, because obviously we'll be in the end of our triennium, and it will be for the future next council to make those calls as we approach an annual plan process. The second part is, if I can just refer my colleagues to a comment, an email, from Mr. Paul Walbrick, dated the 9th of April, and I'm reading only part, I won't go through the whole thing. We are currently in communications with Te Manu Topu, or Ohinimutu, hopefully I haven't buggered that up too much, to identify how they wish to engage with our RLC and the wider village, including other village entities. The following steps are being planned. Convene a village hui to update and share results of previous work done, gather feedback, address concerns and explore solutions. Compile responses and draft a plan based on community input. Present the draft plan in a follow-up hui and determine the next steps, approval revisions, reiterate the plan as needed through further hui until it is approved, implement the final plan ensuring the village remains informed throughout the process. A considerable amount of mahi has been undertaken until recently and halted for a various amount of reasons. I'm not going to read the entire email. Now, it would seem to me that if we're serious about implementing this, even in our remaining time, and certainly as an election point when candidates have to stand up and be asked about these issues, whether it's in the Māori ward or the general ward across, and obviously the mayoral candidates as well, it would seem to me that we have to be showing some leadership here. So I take on board criticism about perhaps how this motion has been put and in terms of detail, but I still think that there is stuff we can do, and I think it's important that we show some leadership. And I just wonder if we can be true about this consultation period, and if we're genuine about listening to what concerns are. It would seem from my observations and interactions with locals down there, this will be brought up. And to simply say, well, we'll just wait for the annual plan, I don't know that that's going to carry weight. And I don't know if it's going to be enough for us as candidates to be able to just say, sorry, that's for the next council. In terms of decision making and finance, I totally understand. I do think, though, as I say, I've heard the concerns raised about how perhaps this motion's been put, but it is what it is. I still think we can move forward with this without blowing a budget or what I'd ask for is a report. That's all it's asking for, is for a report. Now, basically, if the CE says, here's some bullet points, this needs to be more fleshed out in the future for OP, I understand that. I totally understand that. So I still ask for my colleagues to consider those points. And can I just end on, when people attended a certain meeting at Rotorua last year, suddenly there was a great big change in certain people's attitudes about how we were going to fund Rotorua. Now, it didn't worry me because personally I supported it, the change, so I was more than happy to. And also with Tarawera. Some people around here were more than happy to put $3.5 million of ratepayers towards the scheme. Now, that changed, so that's fine. But if it's okay for Rotorua when you face a hostile meeting, if it's okay for Tarawera to be on the phone and sending you emails, for those priorities to be assessed, what are we saying to the folks at Ohinimutu if we're not prepared to go out of our way a little bit more and produce some reports? Especially if those reports are help with the consultation and that trust factor that moves forward. So that's it for me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for my colleagues. And I do urge you to consider at least putting this forward so we can move with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments from the floor? I just would like to add some thoughts because I am grateful to Councillor Patterson for raising these matters, and there was no criticism about the notice of motion. It was done with the right intent, and it's become apparent through the information that's been provided to date that it's a very complex issue. It's a complex environment in Ohinimutu as it is in Ngāpuna and many other thermal areas across our district. And so to single out one region above the others that struggle with the same conditions is challenging. Given the time frame that we have, the information that will be potentially could be brought back to us in August will be lacking the detail that is probably necessary to move forward with any real meaningful purpose, because we have experienced situations with projects where we have moved forward without the detailed financial and information beforehand, and so I don't want to put the committee in a position where we are rushing things. This is an important piece of work, there's no denying that. It's a unique and special place, as has been mentioned by the councillors. So the intent behind this is, I agree with. I'm just concerned about the timing and the ability for us to actually deliver something meaningful in the time frame that we have left to us. It has been noted, I'm sure, by the staff and also by the community who might be listening to this, that we are definitely concerned about the impact of any potential spills or releases into the environment, and we take that really seriously in our work as a council, and we have met the standards that have been set for us by legislation and our own KPIs within the funding envelope we have. So to make any major changes to this particular area of Ohinimutu is challenging and taken in isolation. I think it's a bigger piece of work that we need to look at across our geothermal district in Rotorua. So while I thank you very much for your support, I will be unable to support it in the context that it's done at the moment. But if there's any final comments from the mover before we put it to the vote.
I would thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me another crack. Yes, I would just like to echo Councillor O'Brien's comments that if we at least start the process now, whatever the brief report might show up on our desks in August, at least that's a starting point. That's all it is, a starting point. If we start it now, show leadership, the next council will take it on and decide one way or another if it's financially even feasible. I'm not expecting us to decide that now, but just I would really appreciate giving thought to starting the process. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. On that note, councillors, you have the notice of motion in front of you. I will ask for a show of hands for those in favour of proceeding with this motion. Or show of hands, please, in favour. Thank you. And I'll ask for those against. And is there any abstentions there? Thank you, councillors. That has not passed. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for the valuable discussion that was had on that item. It's taken us a little while, so I wonder if we might break now for lunch, because I believe it's time for us to have a break since we had a meeting this morning as well. So we'll allow half an hour for everybody. Is that enough to have a break? So we'll return here at quarter past two, please. Oh, sorry, that's 1:15. Quarter past one, councillors. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for that break, councillors. We'll now get back onto the agenda. Item number 7.1, and it's a presentation. This is the high-level priority property strategy, and I'd like to invite Stavros Michael and Russell George to speak to the presentation. And I'll note that we've got Councillor Brown back online. Welcome. And I'll hand over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, just a very brief introduction. Russell George here is the manager responsible for infrastructure and assets long-range strategies and asset management planning. I would have Samantha here, who is fortunately she's into another meeting at this point in time. But Samantha is responsible to give effect to the plans and the various strategies the council will decide in due course. Now, property is the second largest asset that the Rotorua Lakes Council has. It's after transport in terms of potential replacement value. And I do have to confess here, it is a challenging portfolio. It's a challenging portfolio because when we're talking assets supporting water, transport, and so on, it's a straight assignment of those assets are assigned to a particular activity or particular service, while the property portfolio supports a range of other activities. Decisions made by council through annual plans and long-term plans related to those activities have an inherent assumption behind that the condition of the property and facilities that support those activities are in fit state for that particular activity. Property facilities are also surface assets, unlike pipes that are into the ground or roads that rely on ground conditions. The surface assets of the property are subject to significant regulatory constraints because they house a lot of people most of the time and activities, and obviously you have to meet those regulations, and obviously the assets themselves, deterioration rates and community expectations are quite different from other assets. The presentation today really is all about setting the scene to inform developing our strategy in the long-term plan, and it's aimed to give you a snapshot as to what we have, where these properties are assigned to, what other activities they support, and highlight some strategic objectives we set for ourselves over the next 12 months, and especially in preparation for the next long-term plan. So to that effect, I will let Russell to progress through the presentation, and we'll happy to take any questions following the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stavros. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Stavros said, this objectives have set out here, but the strategy aims to identify the property assets required by activity managers to effectively deliver their council services, to establish agreed service levels that will guide decisions on maintenance, renewals and upgrades, to identify underutilised or surplus assets, and to explore opportunities for efficiency improvements across the portfolio. As part of developing the property and facility strategies, we're also working towards enhancing data-driven decision-making by using improved asset data and analytics to support more informed, transparent and strategic choices, exploring options for heritage buildings by assessing the condition, use and future potential of heritage assets to ensure the value is preserved and aligned with community needs, and by aligning funding with strategic priorities through integrating all insights into the development of appropriate funding levels for the next LTP. So this slide presents the range of buildings and facilities owned by Council that are actively used to support and deliver Council services and activities. As expected, the vast majority of assets in the portfolio fall into this category, reflecting their central role in enabling service delivery across the district. In addition to the assets used for core council activities, the portfolio also includes building and land parcels acquired through various means that are not currently required for service delivery. These include assets that were acquired for public works that did not proceed, and these are often leased out to generate revenue or maintain occupancy.
Russell, might be good if you just pause there. Just want to check to the Chair, do you want to take questions as we go or at the end?
There was a lot of information in those 2 slides alone, perhaps. Do the councillors have any questions at this stage, or would you wish to move on? I'll just give them a chance to get to that point. Are you happy to move on? Looks like we are. Thank you for asking. No, unless there's anything you wanted to add.
Look, what I'd just say is these 2 slides really, and I'm looking at Councillor Brown a little bit here because they're the start of the genesis of how we can answer the question, how do these assets continue to remain assets and avoid become liabilities in the long term? This slide is around making sure that we are using those assets well, wisely and efficiently. And then on the next slide, when we get there, these are assets that aren't tied to a particular activity area, and that these will form the core part of what I propose as a work program for the next council around looking at this through an opportunity and investment lens and seeing if there are opportunities where allowed, obviously with due consideration of how we came to be in possession of these properties, to see if they can be better used in a more financially sustainable manner. So again, I think these 2 are probably the salient points. So I'm happy to take any questions here or anything else councillors want to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. C. Is there anything that comes to mind, councillors, that you want to talk about now? I have a question from Councillor Brown and then Councillor O'Brien.
I'm not sure I need to answer this, but is this the full list? Because I'm aware of a property on Leonard Road that doesn't appear to be listed here.
Yes, we are aware of that property, and as said earlier, we are looking into the possibility of negotiating a transfer of that land property as a potential wetland, as a wetland area, and we'll look into that. We are working through that.
Okay, so is there anything else that's missing from this list, or is that a?
I think that's a comprehensive list, Councillor Brown.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, just to follow on from Councillor Brown, so forgive me if I can just give an example. Is it including sports clubs, etc., like that, where we may own the land? Although I appreciate it may be, perhaps, if it's particular sports that may not be in your portfolio as a...
Sorry, Councillor, it doesn't include reserve land.
Okay, thank you.
There doesn't appear to be any... Oh, yes, Councillor Kofong.
Do we own some of the buildings that we have on 10-year leases for community groups? Is that part of this? Because who has the responsibility to maintain those buildings, given that the rentals are very, very low?
Well, an example of that, Councillor Kaifong, is a youth centre, which has been gifted to the council, and we maintain it at this point in time.
That's on the previous slide, isn't it? It is on the list.
I was just thinking of some of the leases that we often get through the office around the 10-year leases that are about $120 a year for 10 years. There seems to be a number of those on, I'm assuming council, maybe they're on reserves, but they're obviously buildings that we are letting out to community groups.
So through you, Madam Chair, so this list should be comprehensive of buildings, and it should be comprehensive of land excluding reserves.
Oh, I'm just wondering if there is a few missing then.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, maybe I'll take that question offline.
Yes, thank you.
This is only dealing with real property, so we're not talking about things like artworks or heritage items that have been gifted?
No, that's correct.
Is there an opportunity to look at divestment or reassessment of the current holdings we have, maybe as part of the museum exhibition, given we're having to insure them for a significant value. A lot of them are gifted, may never be displayed. So is there an opportunity to look at that at some point as well?
I can see that there's a nod going on that is something we could consider, but perhaps not part of this piece of work itself. So noted. I note your comments. And Tapsel?
Apologies if I missed it or it's still coming, but just regarding community halls, okay, they've been gifted, but also there is halls that are used for the purpose of the community, such as those down Pererika Street, or is that not? I thought those that had a connection with council somehow, or is that not? The ones on Pererika Street near St. John, the old St. John's ambulance?
No, community halls definitely having the previous slide there, the supporting our community activities. I don't think that some of the facilities you're talking about Pererika Street belong to us.
Oh, okay, thank you. Apologies, they are leased through us. They are leased through us. Oh, the land. But would that not? Okay, we might have to follow up on that one too. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so again, appreciate your patience with as we grapple with this. As you can appreciate, we haven't had a comprehensive list, and that's what we're trying to get to. So if it's a reserve land, it will not be on this list, even if we manage a lease on it. However, if there's a building on a reserve, we should pick it up on this list.
If it's council-owned, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillors, for those questions and clarification. There appears to be no further questions, so I'll move on. Thanks, Russell.
Okay. So these assets, as said, made up ones that were acquired for public works that did not proceed. There's some vacant land parcels that remain unused and may present opportunities for future development or disposal, and some heritage-listed buildings, such as the Arts Village and the Blue Baths, which hold cultural and historical significance but may require special consideration for future use or preservation. We ought to move that on, because it doesn't seem to.
We'll move that on for you.
Okay.
Presently.
Okay. So, Council's heritage listed buildings include a mix of activity enabling assets that support current council services and non-activity enabling assets that do not directly tie to service delivery. Key decisions will be required to determine the future operational status of each facility. In an operational state, buildings remain active and accessible and require ongoing funding for renewal programs, maintenance and compliance. In a dormant state, buildings that are not actively used and funding can be limited to essential safety measures only. The gifted facilities come with conditions that restrict divestment. If no longer required, these assets must be returned to the original gifting entity. And the gifted facilities include the Community Youth Centre, the Waikiri Hot Pools and the community halls. The key decisions ahead are whether to maintain and operate the facilities, which requires alignment with agreed levels of service that will inform facility management plans and funding needs, or if the facilities are no longer required or viable to maintain, to return them to the gifting entity. These decisions will shape the long-term approach to managing gifted assets and their role in community service delivery. So Council's property portfolio has an estimated replacement value of $657 million and a fair value of $245 million. Need to qualify these replacement values in that we don't currently have accurate replacement values for all of the buildings, and where we don't have those, we've estimated them at this stage using reinstatement values that we use for insurance purposes. And we're currently in the process of rectifying this information gap. Sector standards recommend that maintenance and renewal budgets should be 2 to 4% of the replacement value of assets. But before we can calculate what this desired maintenance renewal budget should be, We need to verify and update the replacement values across the portfolio and also ensure that the property and facilities portfolio aligns with service delivery needs and strategic priorities. Conducting a strategic review of Council's property and facilities portfolio will mitigate several risks. Underutilised buildings represent an opportunity cost as the resources tied up in them could be redirected to higher priority services or investments. And assets that are not fit for their intended purpose may generate uneconomic outcomes, including increased operational cost and reduced value. Inappropriate maintenance can result in increased building deterioration, increased reactive maintenance costs, poor presentation of facilities, non-compliance with building regulations, and negative impacts on the services supported by these activities. So during this the financial year we've just moved into, we'll develop a comprehensive property and facilities strategy along with the associated policy and asset management planning to inform the next LTP and to ensure alignment with service delivery needs, asset condition and funding priorities. This work will provide a strategic foundation for future decision making and investment in Council's property and facilities portfolio.
I think this is probably just another one to pause at. Sorry, Russell, and see whether there are any questions. These are what we think the work streams are and some of those milestones when we'll hit them. And again, objective is being that we're comprehensive as far as possible with these assessments. So.
Is there any questions, councillors, or comments? Yes, Councillor Metetsu.
Thank you. A real key one for me, and we've already signalled this direction towards commercialisation, which is actually ensuring that for those assets that we do have that are or could be of good quality, that they are generating the revenue expected. In this slide, in the properties and facilities strategy that's expected, I see, to be completed by December 2025, will that strategy or any other of these work streams be confirming or looking at what could be prioritised in terms of investment into that asset first, and then secondly, whether that investment could be just council or future private-public partnerships, given that we have quite a significant replacement value that we will not be able to meet on our own, but we may also have, as we have seen with our facilities in many examples, private investors that would come and make those replacements, have a 10 to 15 year lease as an example. Yeah, well, is that what the property and facilities strategy is seeking to achieve, or will that be covered elsewhere? Because I believe it will be important.
I think, yes, Your Worship, we expect to identify all these opportunities, to be brought back to the, to elected members, to make some decisions about. In the next couple of slides, you see what we are targeting over the next 12 months, and then we'll have a bit more discussion about it. I just want to highlight a couple of areas, but let Russell finish his next couple of PowerPoints, and I'm sure that will crystallize some of your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so to sum up, the steps we'll take...
Hang on, sorry, Russell. I think this question.
Oh. Sorry to interrupt you, Russell, there. Thank you. Just a question regarding I didn't see it, maybe I was late and I apologise for my tardiness. The Hope Upper Street properties, were they included in here that we tried to sell and took off the market?
Opposite the library, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
They were?
Land holdings, yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I also just have a quick... I'll move to Councillor Wado first, and then I've got a question to follow.
Cool, thank you. Just a quick question. It was on the other slide, but it's okay. It's just with regards to the blue bars. Just to refresh my memory around that, the situation with that building, my understanding is still a heritage building, much like the museum. Is that correct?
It is a heritage building, correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I was just confirming.
Thank you. And I was just going to ask, going back to the process, the timeline there, will the particularly with the community buildings such as a youth centre and community halls, will there be some level of consultation with the communities that are involved with those facilities in this process that's outlined here?
Well, absolutely. We would expect, any decisions, any proposals associated with that will have to communicate it and discuss with those communities who are, might be affected by that.
Great. Thank you.
So just going to, the question was, on the milestones here, are we anticipating any community engagement on this time frame? And we might just need to come back to you, Chair, on that, because this is work done by staff. Technically, we haven't at the moment got an engagement plan around the discussions with the various hundreds of properties associated with this. And I anticipate that might be something that's more aligned to the next long-term plan where we can wrap the community engagement around it. These are milestones that are probably initially for when councillors will see it, and rather than when the community will see these. But
at a high level, I would expect as we formulate those strategies and those high-level approaches, we need to have a conversation so those things do not come out of the blue sky to them. And I give you an example of the youth center, for example, okay? The reality is that we already started a conversation with them, and there will be possibilities that, and I don't want to preempt that decision, that the council might decide not to want to invest into that. And I'm not preempting that. Then the organizations who are supported by the youth center, they will have an opportunity to explore, opportunities for external funding, to maintain that building. So I don't expect us to come back to you in 6 months' time and say this is a plan without actually having a conversation with those community groups that might be affected. We might not have a fully detailed plan behind that, but at least a conversation that this is what you're doing is quite important to be had.
Yes, I agree, and that's sort of why I asked the question, because I believe there'll be some community groups watching this with interest and some nervousness perhaps too, so to have their voices included in some part of this process and keeping aware of the progress would be most helpful. Thank you. Is there any other questions at this stage? No, we'll move on. Thanks, Russell.
Okay, so to sum up, we're going to clarify the purpose of all the buildings and land, and in the process identify those that are not required to support council activities. Establish service level agreements to support activity managers in delivering services. Optimise the utility of non-activity enabling assets. Develop a property and facility strategy and supporting policy. Enhance asset data quality to enable informed evidence-based decision making, and ascertain appropriate budgets aligned with Council's strategic direction and priorities. So what this work will ensure is that Council's property and facilities management is customer-centric and that it will support the organisation to deliver its services effectively, will be data-informed by providing reliable, accessible information to enable sound decision-making, and proactive and strategic by maintaining assets to appropriate standards and aligning investments with long-term goals. Enhanced information about assets is the essential first step towards making effective future-focused decisions about Council's property and facilities portfolio.
Just to give a couple of examples that we are working through at this point in time, and I think in response to Mayor Tupsel's question earlier, there is an opportunity for us to access funding from the Ministry of the Environment for waste minimisation and undertake some work where there are closed and capped landfill can be used to accommodate operations like the recycling centre. We're talking with our contractor to move, potentially to move their material recovery facility from Thames Coromandel into our landfill. Can use the landfill as an operations centre for activities like our works departments. If all these things come to fruition, the Ministry of the Environment provides a capital funding for such activities because they appear to be willing to do so, especially for the material recovery facility from Thames to remove out the landfill. Potentially, we can vacate 2 large land holdings on Tinai Road, where currently the recycling centre is, and the base of our waste management operator. And on the Bohan Street, we've got some a range of bases over there. Those two sites can be freed up, then going back to what our Chief Executive speaking at earlier, those two sites can be used for commercialization, and explore opportunities for partnerships and joint approaches with the market to maximize their utilization. We've got other sub-optimized facilities, we've got leases, we need to work through that and ask the question, are they generating sufficient revenue for the liabilities they incur? And we gradually be bringing those considerations to your decisions. But the main object is to support those facilities that provide our core activities for which you want to continue to do that, sports fields and EEC and Shimpak and eyesight and these buildings and so on, community housing, pension housing, depending on decisions you're going to make. But those facilities and properties that appear to be suboptimal in their use, the question has to be asked, do we need to continue to own them? Because if we own them, they incur liabilities. If we don't own them, what do we need to do to get out of it and explore possibilities to partner with the market to get the maximum commercial benefit out of the whole process? So we're just setting the scene at the moment so you can understand, as you said, and as Russell said, all this property portfolio has got over $600 million of replacement value. It's a significant portfolio. It's got diverse uses and activities. Community groups rely on some of them, but some of them only pay a stipend of maybe $150 a year for a facility that's worth $4 million to replace. So we need to make these decisions and gradually bring them back to you so we can make the appropriate decisions.
Thank you. Is there any further slides? That's it. Thank you. Councillors, this is a significant piece of work which the team has done a great amount of work on so far already to assess what property we own and the condition it's in, which is work that's sort of been not in place up until this stage. So I commend the team for taking this on and moving us forward in a logical fashion. Is there any questions that you might have still remaining? Councillor Waru, then Councillor Patterson and O'Brien.
Just quickly, thank you, Te Tiamana. In terms of the assets that were gifted, in terms of the halls, community halls and all that, and from what I've just heard and read up on, they were gifted for purpose, and if you're no longer using it for that purpose, it's a bit hard to divest or anything to be returned. Are those particular people or groups still in existence that originally gifted those assets?
Well, some of them are not the same people. Some of the gifted assets and facilities were done back in 1950s, 1960s. Pretty sure some of them no longer exist. But those, the groups themselves, the community groups are still say new, group there, which, as I said earlier, we really need to talk to them to say, well, how much value you place, on these community facilities, for example, okay? Do you want them, what level you want to maintain them? What are the options of managing them up the appropriate level? Because depending on these options, there would be ongoing maintenance and renewal costs, and asset ownership costs that this council has to incur. And to some degree, and again, I don't want to preempt your decisions, it's elected members' decisions. If the level of service, you want to provide, is a particular level, it needs to be clear and very understandable as to what that level of service costs and who pays for it. So those groups that they want to take them over and managing themselves, it might be an avenue and a vehicle for which you need to explore with them. So it can be a universal approach to that. It's got to be on a case-by-case basis. Some groups might be willing to do so. Some groups might not have an interest into that. There is an example where we have community halls, in close proximity to each other, and the question has to be asked, do we need two community halls in an area, or one well-maintained hall is better for that community? I don't know the answers to that. We need to work through that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you for your report, gents. In this report, will you be also looking at ways of reducing costs, replacing old technology with new technology to better power them, etc.? Will you be looking at that? For example, the Energy Event Centre.
Well, we will. I give you a specific example. We are negotiating at the moment with ICA about solar power for the Shimpak. We will they provide, I think, 75% of the capital funding for that, and panels can go on top of the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. We've done some rough estimates that we could be possibly saving about $38,000 a year in energy costs by doing that. So, yes, there are opportunities funded by the government or by the Crown for us making a smaller contribution, but a business case analysis has to be done. If we invest X amount of dollars into something, what are the energy efficiencies we can gain, going forward in the future? So, as I said earlier, it's a challenging portfolio because it involves not only the physical existence of the building, but the operational efficiency of the building too. And we need to be very careful how we manage these facilities to balance those things, accordingly.
Just one final question. And the other facility, obviously, the one that we talked about recently as far as sports goes is the International Stadium.
Yes.
Have we considered the cost of the lights, the old technology lights that we have at the moment, with replacing them with new technology?
I will push a little bit back on that. You as elected members have to decide what's the function and purpose of that stadium. I was here when you debated that. Depending on the function you want for that facility, then the secondary question is that if that's the function you expect, what interventions need to be made in terms of maintaining that facility that will be both financially stable and cost efficient in terms of operations? And those issues need to come out. You may decide that stadium should, I'm just guesstimating here, I'm just using it for effect, it should be demolished and be used as a picnic site. So before we actually get to the stage as to what we need to do on a facility, the activity owner needs to decide in conjunction with your decision making as to what you want the purpose of that facility to be. Knowing the purpose will drive the asset management. The asset management plan should not drive the function. The function dictates, what the asset management plan should be. And then within that asset management plan, you have to explore opportunities to say what is more cost efficient to do. You might invest some capital up front, but you save in efficiency and better quality outcomes and so on. So that's where we are.
And through you, Madam Chair, if I can add, that's why we brought that paper, so that the timing aligns with this work, so that by the time the options for stadium operation are complete and can be brought to the next council, we can take the council's direction on which way to proceed on investigating options for investment. And if it is something that aligns with improvement of lights for efficiency or a better level of service, then that will flow out of that piece of work. So it's going to. So
just to clarify, there will be some quotes sought so that we do have that kind of information handy?
Yes, at the time at the time that we prepare options for consideration, absolutely, we will have those.
Thank you. And we've got a question from Councillor O'Brien, then Metapsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, thank you both for your report, Stavros and Russell. If I may, I read an interview with one of the project managers on the City Rail Link, and he was asked about coming towards the end of it, and he said, well, one of the sad points about this is I have all these people here, and if there was another project ready to go, we'd be able to jump straight on once this is completed. And I raised that because I see down here we have the blue bars as a non-activity enabling priority for rationalisation. So as I understand, it's on gifted reserve as listed here. It's a heritage building, is that correct? So it can't be demolished by us. So essentially we have probably options of it's a gate and it just is left alone, or we do it up to a point where it's either outside done or able to be used internally as well. So I just wonder if we're perhaps in a danger here as the museum, the design work of those teams comes to a close, now that we're into the building side of it, or halfway through of it anyway. Are we in a problem here that we should probably be prioritising work around the blue bars, ready for the next council to decide in terms of design work, where we're at with the geotech of the ground, the springs, impacts, etc. like that?
Well, my personal response to that, and I feel very strongly about that. As an infrastructure manager, I don't maintain infrastructure because I'm in love with infrastructure. I maintain infrastructure because it serves a higher purpose, water services, transportation services, and so on. I mean, I don't know what what the intent for the blue baths would be. Is it going to be a hotel? It's going to be a bar? It's going to be a swimming pool? It's going to be some. Before you actually construct a plan as to what opportunities we have to convert it into something, we need to decide what it needs to be converted into. And I don't have the answer at this point in time.
Councillor O'Brien, I might try and answer that question. I also am familiar with the reference to CRL that you were talking about, and absolutely in terms of building up the pipeline of capability, both within the organisation and in the market, to then roll from one project to the other is definitely beneficial. Our museum team are past the design stage. So we're not in a position to roll into another design project at this stage. I'm also really conscious, and I've undertaken to this council, that we wouldn't take on another heritage restoration project until we were substantially, or you were substantially satisfied that we are on track with the museum, and I stand by that. If you look at the asset condition assessments, which are due to be completed by August or September this year, that will start to inform which projects the next council might want to tackle as part of the annual plan and which ones get kicked into the long-term plan. So absolutely, we're planning to be as ready as possible generally. I know there are a number of councillors who have a particular interest in the blue baths. I am really keen to get to that when we can get assurance that we have got the museum under control. So there's a benefit to being able to roll a team off one project onto another. I don't see that benefit really exists with the museum because of how different the stages are from where we are in blue baths to the museum. But I have undertaken to be able to get to it as soon as I practically can.
Thank you, and I appreciate your answer, and also from Mr. Michael as well. I suppose what I can have a concern about is that as we enter an election period, people perhaps without our knowledge of how detailed the museum work was, it will become up obviously for a topic. And if certain people want to make promises based on, shall we say, their ideas or what their beliefs are, I think it would have been handy for us to have more detailed about perhaps where the options were, what ballpark costs were, and even if it was even feasible to even go, given earthquake standards, etc., like that currently. So, but I take on board, and I thank you very much for your answers, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Move to Mayor Tapsell, then Councillor Lee and Councillor Waro.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm really excited about this work that's not only been undertaken and was probably largely prompted by the situation with community halls that we found ourselves in, but also really excited for the potential to work a lot smarter and efficiently moving forward. The key information that I'm really after, and I'm not sure where this falls in exactly, is just when we identify all of the facilities that we do have, how much is it currently costing us? What is the utilisation, which I think is actually a really key point in there, and how much revenue are we accruing on that? Now, I think that in itself, those three pieces of information will be key in identifying what facilities or assets are actually being used and what have the potential to be used. Because as time has gone on and our community grows and also changes, so do our community organisations and also the activities that our locals choose to participate in. And I'm just mindful that constantly I'm being approached by community groups that are either new or significantly growing, and they're seeking community halls or facilities. They do have private money that they're willing to invest into it to bring them up to scratch or to build from new it's quite exciting. But currently there are long-term leases in some of our facilities that are very run down, are not well maintained, and there could be the potential to be able to use them a lot smarter. So I think I can't see the utilisation in here, but I do hope that's somewhere that's the key information that we can see. Because certainly just with the example of the community halls, we had some examples of community halls that were used constantly by those rural communities, and we also had some that had hardly been booked in a whole year. So, yeah, just hoping we can get that information once this work is complete too.
No, thank you, Your Worship. And to be clear, and I think I want to speak on behalf of my Chief Executive, but I think one of the intentions of the Chief Executive's reorganization and the functionality he's initiated is to introduce a bit of attention within the organization. If an activity owner or managing community services or whatever, they want a building to be managed in a very high level of quality, our job as property and facilities managers is to say, well, what is the level of service you want? Do you understand how much it's going to cost to maintain that level of service? What is the utilization? And is it the best use of money for low utilization? So I think that inherent tension between the facility managers, ourselves, and the activity owners, it has to be introduced there to precisely answer that question. It's quite easy for people to say what they want. It's not always easy to justify it in terms of cost and revenue ratios to say, well, it's justifiable by that. And I think your question relies along these lines. And that's the intention of creating this kind of tension between our group and other activities to pose these questions continuously.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your report. Very prudent way forward for us, I'm sure. So, well done and thank you. Just following on from Councillor Waru's line of questioning on page 8 of the presentation, it does refer to how the Community Youth Centre, Waikiri Hot Pools, community halls cannot be divested to market and must be returned to the gifting entity. What's the legal framework behind that?
Well, I can articulate the exact legal framework just right now, but we can get back to you with that. But my understanding is that if a facility, a land or an asset has been gifted to the council, in a sense, it's been vested to the council for stewardship and for a particular purpose, and the council does not want to need that facility or use that facility, the legal requirement says that those facilities need to go back to the person, to the people who have gifted them. But I can go back to you with exact legal terms behind that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Waru.
Tēnā no koe te chairman, I thank you again for the kōrero. Just a quick question. I'm not too sure who we're best positioned to answer it. However, given the current direction of the government, trying to improve, infrastructure and coming up with different ways and means to do so, also saying there's no more money, the party's over type lines. The heritage building, and I'm talking specifically about the blue bars, would it not be an opportune time to have a conversation with the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and say, look, these things, although, yes, might have had it in its heyday, would have been, a beautiful place, but it's become a real liability now. I'm not too sure I suppose I'm just trying to explore the idea of maybe now we wouldn't be the only council in that position. Is there any sort of appetite for that kind of conversation?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Waru. I am following with quite keen interest what's happening around the country in terms of heritage listing of some buildings. You'll be aware in Wellington there was a decision recently to revoke the heritage status of quite a significant flat building, accommodation building, which now
That's
has
why I'm asking.
unlocked the opportunities for some development. Look, all of that will be things that we consider as we get, sequentially. I'm really hesitant to do them ad hoc. We've had a number of ad hoc approaches, and at times I've brought them to you because there's been a real tangible opportunity, and I'm keen to move fast when those occur. When they don't occur, I'm just quite keen to be deliberate and sequential, strategic and purposeful in how we work through these. But they will, look, I won't have all the answers to those because, as Her Worship alluded, there might be a private enterprise who sees value in the heritage aspect and can come up with a compelling business case that why we would keep it, and I'd want to obviously explore those before we looked at more drastic options.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I only ask because of that very situation in Wellington, where I think that's sort of set a standard now where you can do it for one, especially here. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. There appears to be no further questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. We do appreciate your attention to this matter. And as I said, this is a significant value portfolio. It needs to be given the right approach and the right emphasis into that. We take from you the direction and the expectation that what we must keep, we have to keep them well maintained. The things that cannot be justified in keeping because of the importance, then or creative alternatives to that so we can reduce the burden on the average ratepayer. So thank you very much, and we will work in that effect, and we'll let you know as we progress. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for this strategic and purposeful approach to our portfolio, which is significant, and it's going to put a body of work in front of the future councils that's going to be very helpful for their strategic decision making. So thank you. Appreciate that. Councillors, we're now moving on to item 8.1, which is Capital Delivery Projects Progress Report. This is on page 14 of your agendas. There is also a confidential report that sits alongside this one, and you'll see that in your Stella as well. We'll leave any questions in that particular part of the report into the confidential section, if you don't mind. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the report Capital Delivery Projects Progress Report from May-June 25 be received? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. And I'd like to invite Thomas to overview the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elrond is taking some spent time with his family this week, so I'll try my best to answer any questions. Happy to take the report as read and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Thomas. Councillors, do you have any questions on this at this stage? We can always save them until the next part of the agenda, I think. It looks like we can move on, but thank you very much, Thomas. We'll ask you some questions later. Thank you. So that moves us on to the next part of the of the agenda, which is the consideration to move into public excluded. I'd just like to advise that there's 3 items that could be considered in public excluded today. They include 9.1, the confidential minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee from the 4th of June 2025, 9.2, the detailed financial report update for the capital projects, as mentioned, and 9.3, the urgent item, which we accepted onto the agenda earlier, the variation and approval for Tarawera Sewage Scheme Stage 1. I'd just like to advise that the reason for moving into public excluded is to carry out commercial activities and to carry out negotiations without prejudice or disadvantage, and that the consideration to public interest has been considered in these matters, and the officer's advice is that the reasons for confidentiality outweigh the public interest in these matters. Can I have a mover and a seconder to move into public excluded, please? That's Councillor Wang and Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried, thank you. And we'll just allow a minute for the